morning. It's the end of April, and today I thought we would talk about families. I looked at how does family life in today's world, and when I say today's world, I guess I mean before all the social distancing stuff, and how does that compare to life in biblical times? So I have some facts I wanted to share with you. The Israelites lived in nuclear households with relatives in clusters of houses around a common courtyard. So they had their houses all around, and then in the middle was a courtyard where they would have the well and where they would gather. Extended families lived on the same compound together. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, they all lived in the same area, and they usually lived in that area for all of their lives. Today, to contrast, we spread out all across our country. It's always interesting to ask someone where their family is, and usually they're spread out amongst several states, and sometimes even across the globe. In the New Testament, because families couldn't travel easily, it was very difficult to travel, it was hard to travel, and it was hard to move their things, so they pretty much stayed put in the same geographic area throughout their entire lives. Today, it's not uncommon for children to have lived in several different states during their childhood. When I taught school, I even had students that came from other states. I had one from England and one from Mexico. Families today operate as individual entities. Your family, husband, wife, and kids, acts as a separate unit. Each household runs itself, and we put up our privacy fences, and with our garage door openers, we come and go, and nobody sometimes even knows if we're home or not. But when you lived in that common courtyard like the Israelites, people were aware of who was there and who wasn't, and if someone was missing, and all of those things, and they all worked together for the common good. Today, children have lots of opportunities through education. They can choose what they want to be when they grow up. In the time of the Israelites, children learned about work and life skills from their families. Girls worked with their mothers, and they learned how to bake, how to sew, how to weave, how to mill grain, how to spin cloth, and how to care for children. Boys worked with their fathers and learned their father's business. And if you remember, Jesus learned carpentry skills from Joseph. Today's world, we consider kids to be adults in some matters at age 18 and legally at age 21. Of course, they get their driver's licenses at age 16. But in biblical times, ancient Jewish tradition was for boys to marry around the age of 16 or 17, and girls married much younger. If a person was 20 and unmarried, that was considered very bizarre. Parents usually chose a husband for their daughters, and they chose a wife for their sons. And some parents discussed their ideas of a future spouse with their child before entering into an agreement, but that didn't happen all the time. Boys and girls never dated, and they were never allowed to be alone together, not even after they were engaged. A negotiator who was not from either family worked out the arrangements with the families of the groom-to-be and the family of the bride-to-be. The fathers signed a contract, and the boy spent the next 9 to 12 months of the engagement building or preparing a house for his bride and family-to-be. Once married, spouses were married for life. Jewish people regarded marriage as the natural duty of men and women, and the marriage was a union of two families, not just two people. Today's families are smaller. The average number of children born in 2018, according to Statista.com, was 1.9 children per family in the United States. In biblical times, families were large. Couples often hoped for a son as their firstborn so they could pass on the family name, but also because it was the duty of the firstborn son to care for the parents in their old age. Also, in biblical times, families they treated their parents with esteem and honor, and this was because of the fifth commandment to honor your father and your mother. If you ever shamed your parent or embarrassed them in public, that was absolutely despicable. And we see an example of this in the prodigal son when he asked for his inheritance early. He's essentially saying to his dad, I wish you were dead. Marriages, when we talked about those a moment ago, the engagement period was long. It was about a year, and that allowed for the boys to set up the household, and it allowed for the girls to go ahead and start to prepare for their households as well. Weddings were the most important social events in Jewish society, and they often involved the entire village. In today's world, weddings are very important as well, and of course, our children select their own spouses. Parents rarely are involved in the selection of a spouse. We marry today for love, not to bind two families together. I've reflected a lot about families this week in my own life. We've had a really huge blessing in our family this week. My parents have relocated their home from Florida to North Carolina, and in fact are now living right across the creek from us. John and I and our kids and their families are really thrilled to have my parents here with us. But it was a really difficult and a very different move for my parents. They were unable to visit with and say goodbye to my sister and her family. My sister has 3 sons, one who is only 4 years old, and it was really hard for my parents to leave Florida and not be able to spend time with them and say goodbye. My parents were also unable to visit very dear and lifelong friends. They called and they said goodbyes on the phone, but they weren't able to just get together one more time to say goodbye. My kids and their families wanted to be here to help my parents unpack, but we didn't allow them to do that because of social distancing. And of course, they want to celebrate the fact that they're living here now. But social distancing has given us an opportunity to reach out digitally to family and friends, and some of us are social distancing and quarantining with our families, and others of us are separated from them during this time. Those of us that don't have children in our homes, we're having a very different experience with social distancing and quarantining than those of you with children. FaceTime's been a wonderful way to see our family members that we have to be socially distanced from. And I'll tell you honestly, I miss those little arms of my grandchildren wrapped around my neck in a hug, and it makes me tear up just telling you this. I miss my son's hugs too. These are really strange times indeed. Weddings are being held as a virtual event, or as in the case of a boy that we've known since he was 9 years old, they're being postponed entirely. Funerals are another family event that we cannot share in at this time. I decided to search the web and the Bible for Bible verses about family, and I'd like to share with you a few from an article that Women's Day magazine had online. From Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. Exodus 20:12 tells us, honor your father and your mother, that you may live a long time in the land of the Lord your God is giving to you. Isaiah 66:13 says, as a mother consoles a child, so I will console you, and you will be consoled over Jerusalem. I thought of this one with homeschooling. Colossians 3:23, fathers, do not provoke your children so they will not become disheartened. That can go for mothers too, I'm sure. Matthew 19:19, honor your father and mother and love your neighbor as yourself. And in times of social distancing, it is important that we reach out to our neighbors as well. Proverbs 6:20 says, My child, guard the commands of your father and do not forsake the instruction of your mother. And I really like this one from Proverbs 17:17. A friend loves at all times, and a relative is born to help in adversity. And this one speaks to me. It says that we're to help one another, we're to help our families, and to reach out to our families during this time as well. And I think that's really important right now. I think it's really hard for us to be together as families, and I know it's difficult. I've been so blessed that my kids have stayed in the area, in the town that I live in, and I'm able to see my grandchildren quite frequently. And I'll be honest, this is probably the longest stretch of time I have ever gone without seeing my grandchildren. I typically see them on average probably once a week, so it's difficult now. But stop and say a small prayer and reflect on those who mean the most to you. And I would suggest to you that you find a family-centered Bible verse each day that can bring you all closer together and not only build your family, but build your faith as well. Pick up the phone and call one another. Check in on each other. FaceTime, Zoom. Stay connected. We in our family have already planned a family gathering for when this is over. We have a day planned, a day trip planned for all of us that we're going to get in our cars and we're going to go and meet up, and it's going to be wonderful. Also, I've invited my kids to drop their children off at my house for a weekend because it is a different experience for those of you who have young children at home. I want to give my children and their spouses a chance to just rest and relax after having the kids home 24/7 and trying to homeschool and all of that. And honestly, I also want the time alone with the grandkids as well. But we need to support one another, and we need to remember that in this time, we are all a family, and we are a church family as well. I miss my church family very much. Am starting to enjoy these Zoom sessions with my Sunday school class, with the different committees that I'm on, as a chance to just see one another again. But I do miss you all, and I can't wait till we can all be together and have corporate worship again. Bishop Holston has announced that we will not be having church services together as a church family until at least May 20th. And so as we go through these next 3.5 or so weeks of social distancing, just remember to reach out to one another. Remember that your church staff is here for you if you need anything. Call us. We want to be available to you if you need us. And remember that this too shall pass. It's not pleasant for anyone right now. I especially worry about those of you who live alone. But again, reach out to one another. Our M&Ms will be meeting on Thursday night at 6 o'clock through Zoom. If you haven't been invited to join us for that activity, please send me an email at djordan@pleasanthillmethodist.org so that I can invite you to join us. Our children's ministry will be getting together Sunday at 3 p.m. And again, if you have a child that hasn't received an invite, please send me an email at djordan@pleasanthillmethodist.org. I can't wait till our church family can be together again. I can't wait till my own family can be together again. Stay in touch. Reach out to one another. I ask that we just keep positive. See you next time. God bless.